Harrison Smith was born on 19 May 1911 in the city of Cairo, Michigan. He was the son of a school teacher and prominent attorney who later became a judge, and was the only son in a family of 6. Known for living a life of convenience and privilege, Smith's parents sent him to attend Howe Military Academy in Indiana to instill discipline into their teenager. As a young adult, Smith worked mostly as a tax field agent, but largely lived off of inheritance his father left him when he passed away when Smith was just 23 years old. Smith gained a reputation of being spoiled, trouble-prone, obnoxious, and not liked by other peers. In 1929, Smith got married, but divorced just a few years later in 1932 after having one child in the marriage. He got married again in 1941, just prior to his arrest for failing to pay child support. Faced with the choice of going to jail or joining the military, Maynard Smith enlisted in the United States Army Air Forces on 31 August 1942 in Detroit, Michigan, at the age of 31. After finishing basic training at Shepherd Field, Texas, Smith volunteered to become an aerial gunner. He chose this route because he resented having to take orders from men much younger than him, and he knew that as a gunner he could promote much more quickly than in any other job. At that time, you could become a staff sergeant within weeks of completing gunner school, as opposed to the normal period of years it would take in other career fields. Smith was a small-statured man at 5 feet 4 inches and well suited for the ball turret gunner position. He graduated from Flexible Aerial Gunner School in Harlingen, Texas on 9 November 1942 and was promoted to staff sergeant the very next month. After a couple very short assignments in Pocatello, Idaho and Casper, Wyoming, he departed the United States for duty in the European Theater of Operations on 3 March 1943. After completing a 3-week course in combat crew training, he was assigned to the 423rd Bombardment Squadron 306 Bomb Group as a ball turret gunner on the B-17 Flying Fortress. Sometime during his training, he gained the nickname Snuffy, after the character Snuffy Smith in the popular comic strip Barney Google and Snuffy Smith. Sergeant Smith shared a lot of the same characteristic traits as the cartoon character, who was short, stubborn, and often quite obnoxious. Thus, the popular Air Force nickname Sergeant Snuffy or Airman Snuffy was born. Several weeks passed before Sergeant Smith was given his first mission. It was rumored that bomber crews did not want to take the perceived risk of flying with someone with the personality traits of Sergeant Snuffy on their mission. Sergeant Smith quickly proved all of those that doubted him wrong on his very first mission on 1 May 1943. The mission target, German U-boat pens at Saint-Nazaire, aka Flank City on the west coast of France. It gained this nickname because of the heavy German anti-aircraft defenses it was known for. The initial phases of the mission were successful without a hitch, and the B-17s dropped most of their bombs on target. Shortly after bombs away, however, the group of B-17s were engaged by German Focke-Wulf 190 fighters. In response, the bombers fled to a large cloud bank to evade the German fighters. Flying into this cloud bank disoriented the aircrews and caused them to fly off course. This navigational error caused them to attempt a landing on the coast of France near the city of Brest, where they thought they were approaching the coast of England. Once descending to 2,000 feet and realizing their mistake, they came under heavy attack from German fighters and anti-aircraft guns below. Staff Sergeant Smith's B-17 fuselage was raked with flak. An unexploded .88 caliber anti-aircraft shell ripped into the fuselage and ruptured a 400-gallon fuel tank. Fuel poured into the fuselage of the bomber aircraft and an intense fire broke out in the radio compartment. Smith, who was in the belly turret at this time of attack, was attempting to fight off the enemy, but his ball turret lost power and oxygen, and he was forced to manually crank himself into the main compartment of the aircraft. Immediately upon entering the fuselage, Smith saw that the aircraft was on fire and the situation looked very bad. So bad, in fact, that the radio operator and 2 waist gunners bailed out of the aircraft for the relative safety of the waters below. Smith, however, did not give up. He began extinguishing the fire alone. In the meantime, the enemy was relentless and still firing upon the bomber. Every time the German fighters made a pass, Smith would man the 2 50-caliber machine waist guns to defend their aircraft. After a while, the tail gunner came crawling out of the back of the aircraft, extremely wounded. Smith administered first aid to his tail gunner, saving his life. Eventually, the German fighters started running low on gas and withdrew from the fight, but Smith and his crew were still in a very dangerous situation. The escaping oxygen of the damaged aircraft fanned the flames of the fire to such an intense heat that ammunition in the radio compartment began to explode. After using the fire extinguishers, he was forced to resort to alternate methods, such as using water bottles and wrapping himself up in protective clothing and extinguishing the flames with his hands and body. Additionally, Smith began throwing exploding ammunition overboard to prevent it from causing further damage to the aircraft. With the fires finally under control, Smith went up to check on the crew in the cockpit. Both the pilot and the co-pilot were wounded, and Smith administered first aid to both of them before returning to the rear of the aircraft, where he began repairing critical control cables that were essential for landing. For 90 minutes, Smith fought off enemy fighters, fought intense fires, administered first aid to his fellow airmen, unloaded exploding ammunition and heavy equipment, and completed critical repairs to the aircraft to ensure they could make it home safely. The pilots of the wounded B-17 were finally able to land the aircraft on a British airstrip near Land's End with approximately 3,500 bullet holes riddled throughout the airframe. Because of his heroics, Smith saved himself and 6 other crew members that were aboard the aircraft that day. Because of his valor and bravery, Staff Sergeant Smith was awarded the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest and most prestigious personal military decoration that can be awarded. The ceremony was on 15 July 1943, which was 6 weeks removed from his action. Smith's heroics, however, did not change who he was as a person. On the morning of the ceremony, when Secretary of War Henry Stimson flew in from Washington, D.C. to present the medal to Smith in front of several other general officers, the Air Force Band, and reporters from all over, Smith was nowhere to be found. After a frantic search, he was found scraping breakfast leftovers from dishes at the mess hall. He had been assigned KP duty as a punishment for failing to show up to a meeting on time after having a pass, and no one told him about the ceremony. When he found out, he quickly had to change into his service dress and show up for his own ceremony where the Secretary of War was waiting for him. He was the first living airman of the United States Army Air Forces to earn the Medal of Honor for actions in the European theater of World War II, and was the first enlisted airman to receive the Medal of Honor. Sergeant Smith flew 13 combat missions after his action on 1 May 1943, including 4 missions after his Medal of Honor was presented to him. On 3 November 1943, Smith was relieved from duties involving flying because a medical board reported that he was suffering from operational exhaustion. For the remainder of his tour overseas, he was assigned to the 306 Bombardment Group with clerical duties for which he was reduced in rank to private. He returned to the United States on 6 March 1945 and was stationed at Miami Beach with the 1020th Army Air Forces Base Unit until his discharge on 26 May 1945. After World War II, Smith divorced his second wife and married his third wife, an English woman that he met at a USO show, whom he had 4 children with. He worked briefly at the United States Treasury Department and dabbled in politics. In 1970, Smith moved to New York and founded a newspaper, the Police Officer's Journal, an independent newspaper devoted to police and community affairs. He sold the newspaper in 1975 and retired to the St. Petersburg, Florida area. Smith passed away on 11 May 1984 at the age of 72 and was buried at the Arlington National Cemetery near Washington, D.C. Sergeant Smith was certainly not the poster child for what we ask our airmen to be. He had his fair share of discipline issues and was often difficult to deal with. His actions on 1 May 1943 remind us as airmen and as leaders that even Sergeant Snuffy can display inexplicable courage and bravery and do incredible things when their country needs them the most.